China, and so that they'll have the moon in Cancer, and that will say something about them. But where exactly is that moon in Cancer going to operate? So a baby born in the city where you are is going to have a moon in a particular house. I mean, the moon
Right.
was rising about half an hour ago, so I'm thinking the moon is going to, where you are, the moon is in the, I think the moon is in the 12th house. But
Okay.
in order a, for the moon to be on the IC, well, they'd have to be born somewhere else. And so it very much relates not just to when you're born, but where you're
Where?
born.
Okay.
And so the moon in Cancer in the 10th is going to work in the 10th house, is going to operate in a completely different way from moon in Cancer
12th house.
exactly on the IC. So the IC is going to be more personal. And, some astrologers don't use signs. I mean, you don't have to use signs to interpret a chart. You
Okay.
could just focus on angles and you could just focus on aspects. And so a planet on the IC is going to be very, very personal, and it really is going to say something about the time and place of someone's birth and someone's circumstances. Whereas in a sign, it's, it's it is going to be more general.
Okay.
Someone, for example, with moon in Cancer right on the midheaven could be very much focused with the public.
Okay.
Moon on the midheaven. The moon is the public. The moon on the midheaven is the
It's the
public
outward
wanting to,
projection. Yeah.
yeah. That moon on the IC perhaps has a different way of looking at the public, but that doesn't mean to say that because you've got the moon on the IC, that it doesn't mean to say because you've got the moon on the IC that you can't deal with the public. In fact, you might be very comfortable with the public, and
Okay.
that perhaps raises the issues perhaps about some of the charts that or the chart you wanted to look at.
Okay.
For example, do you wanted to look at the actress we
Elizabeth?
were talking about?
Yeah, we're going to get to
Yeah.
that.
So,
Yeah.
and because there we're talking about a moon on the IC chart, but
Right.
but the IC is also, you could also say, if you're doing someone's chart with a moon on the IC, the IC it could be often says, go away. I don't want to share this with you.
Very private
And
people.
so, particularly Mars on the IC, or maybe Moon on the IC, that this is not something we want to talk about.
I see. Is just curious, is the IC in any way connected to our destiny? I'm not sure if you can use that in that way.
Destiny. Well, if you're talking about destiny, is where you should be moving
Like your life
towards.
past. Yeah.
Well, there are a number of things, and there are a number of ways you can look at destiny, the past, and the future. I mean, there are the north nodes. I mean, a north
Right.
node is where you're going to, and so you might look at the sign and the house, and whereas the south node might represent the past
Past.
and what is easiest for you. I like to
Okay.
use the term, the line of least resistance to describe
South
the
node.
south node. Well, it's just easy, and it's late, perhaps even lazy. And you could then say, well, that suggests how, what we were doing in the past, what came easily in the past, and moving into the north node, might be more difficult. As
Yeah.
far as the IC is concerned, well, we have to be comfortable with our destiny. We have to be
Right.
anchored. And of course, most people don't have any planet on the IC.
Most people. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I was always wondering. I know destiny North Node, so that's I guess where we have to face fears probably because if the South Node is least resistance, we're probably going to have obstacles, right, to get to the on our path or the North Node.
Well, I think we're going to do what makes us comfortable. So someone who has the south node on the midheaven
Yeah.
might be incredibly successful because it just comes easily. If getting into the north node on the IC, north node in the, it's going to be tough because that's not what this person wants to do.
Right. Okay. If you could, I'm not sure if you can do this or if it's too much, but are you able to briefly walk through what the IC might mean in different elements, like if it's in a fire or an earth, air sign, or water sign?
Well, one could try. So if you're I mean, this is very, very vague. I would have
Okay.
said to say this, but
Okay.
if you have got, if you've got the IC in a fire sign, and 1 in 4 people will have, all things being equal, will have their IC in a fire sign. It it might be that what you're coming from is, again, it is what you're coming from, you know, is a place where you feel completely connected, where you are able to make all the connections. It's all available to you, and
Okay.
it can make you, perhaps coming from a space where you might actually feel. You might feel the glow of the IC, and don't forget that
Okay.
the IC in a far sign may say something about your father, and
Right.
perhaps the father was someone who did have a sense of purpose, a father who just knew what was right and wrong, who knew what to do, which contrasts with the IC in an earth sign
Hmm.
might be the real quest to be grounded. I mean, you think I see in
I see.
Taurus, so, that's what you're trying to do. I see in an air sign, uh, perhaps you're thinking about your past,
Okay.
whereas in a water sign you might be feeling your past. But I think looking at the IC just in terms of an element might be a bit too vague.
Vague, yeah. Okay. Um, have you ever seen patterns when you look at people's charts, like major life events, like moving or spiritual awakening, that align with IC activations, or I guess the transits as well?
Uh, Yes, I mean, if you've got something on, okay, if you've got something on your IC, if you've got a transit on your IC, then that might, okay, that might be, it could be about moving,
Okay.
uh, because or at least on a psychological level, when a planet crosses the IC, you're thinking very much about your home, where you live, your security, and so there might be the impulse to create a change. It, so that might be how it works. Of course, it depends on what the planet is. If you
Right.
have got Uranus on the IC, that might be quite destabilizing.
Unpredictable.
And so, or Saturn on the IC. So it kind of depends what the planet actually is, but that might be one way of looking at it. And the
Okay.
IC is also about endings,
Oh,
because I think you mentioned that about the eighth house as being eighth house about endings, but the end of the matter is the IC. And so a planet on the IC could be the end of the matter. Uh, this is the
okay.
end.
Right.
And that perhaps indicates why the eighth house has kind of borrowed a lot of material from the fourth house.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't know whether you could associate the IC, particularly with death. I mean, I know that one normally associates the eighth house with death, but
Right.
I mean, there are a number of houses that can be connected with death. I mean, you can connect the seventh house with death. You can connect the fourth house with death. You can connect the the eighth house with death. So there are a number of, it's not just the eighth house, which
It's
is
not
about
just the eighth
death, but
house. Okay.
perhaps you've got to think what death is about.
Right. If is there any, I guess, advice or guidance you would give in regards to the IC, if people are trying to look into their birth charts to kind of navigate dark periods of their life? Is there any advice you would give or guidance as to what we should look for when we're trying to learn about our chart and the IC?
Well, obviously, if someone has got a transit to their IC, and how often transits your IC are, well, it kind of depends on the planet. I mean, the ascendant will cross our IC every single day. The moon will cross our IC every month. Pluto will cross our IC generally once in a lifetime, or perhaps three times in a lifetime because it goes retrograde sometimes, but it may
Right.
never cross our IC. But if we are feeling uncertain, if we're feeling that things are getting shaken up, and we know that a planet is on our IC, that can be reassuring. However bad things are, because we know that in the end, that planet is going to move on.
Right.
And I think that's not just the IC. I think it's about any difficult aspect. We have to do. We just know that once we pin a bad patch to a planet, to a transit or a progression or whatever, it just becomes it becomes more manageable.
Okay. Thank you. Um, I think what we'll do next is we'll go and take a look at the actress Elizabeth Montgomery and her birth chart. I think she was born with her IC in Capricorn and her moon resting right beside it. And behind her public character, she was a quiet fortress of self control, dignity, and a heart that learns strength through solitude and transformation through grace. She's a lovely lady who, after casting a spell, she'd wriggle her nose from the television series Bewitched, which is a more light-hearted, magical role, and then eventually going into the darker roles that she took on. Her life seemed to mirror eighth house journey type things more than once. She had multiple marriages. She suffered with cancer and dealt with personal heartbreak in a more private manner. But she always showed up publicly as composed and professional. Her father was also, from what I was looking at, an important figure in her life that most likely shaped her later years. Archie, I know you have her birth chart. If we look at her IC, it's in Capricorn at 433. What does that tell us about her?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, her chart is interesting. I don't know how much people have heard about Elizabeth Montgomery anymore, but one needs to remember that in the 1960s, she was completely major. I mean, she was just everywhere. I mean, she was like the most famous woman on television, pretty
Right.
much in the 1960s, and so one just forgets this. And so Bewitched was completely huge, and
It was a
so
big deal.
absolutely massive. And Bewitched, that Bewitched series, it was a very 60s thing, and it was about perhaps a change, which it represented the whole change in the 60s, that people were looking at things in a new way. And it was, she lived in one sense a very ordinary life. She was just a suburban housewife,
Right.
and but she was also a witch, and she was basically the one in control, really.
Right.
And I mean, that was one aspect of her life, of her part. But the moon, the moon on the IC. you could look at it in two really rather contradictory ways, and uh, the contradictory ways would be that because she has moon angular, because
Mhm.
she has the moon on the IC, the moon represents the public. And if you've got the
Okay.
moon on any angle, maybe particularly on the MC or the IC, you know how to project yourself in public. So it is a public persona, even though it's on the IC. And it
Oh.
may be not even matter. It may not even matter whether it's on the IC or the MC. I mean, if
Okay.
you think about it, Kim Kardashian has moon on
Yeah.
the IC.
Oh, okay.
And
But she's
I mean,
very famous.
she's very famous. She's very
Yeah.
public. I mean, I don't know about her private life. I'm not particularly interested in Kim Kardashian, but she's got a great chart. I mean, doesn't
Yeah.
matter. I mean, but her chart is she's got a very strong chart. But
Yeah.
so that illustrates that even though you got with Elizabeth Montgomery her moon in Capricorn, which sounds to be quite a restrained moon,
Yeah.
uh, still she was able to project it, and so that's one aspect of it. But then, of course, you have got the private aspect of it, and I think I'm right in saying she didn't actually have a funeral. I may be wrong. She had a memorial service,
Yeah, I
but I
think
don't think
I
she
read
had a
that
funeral.
somewhere. No, I
But
don't
she
think so.
didn't have a funeral, and she died of colon
Colon
cancer, I
cancer?
think,
Yeah.
and it wasn't diagnosed until very late. And of
Yeah.
course, this was in the. I mean, she died in the 90s, and of course, people's society's approach to colon cancer now is completely
Quite
different
different. Yeah.
from, it's something people talk about all the time, and you know, colonoscopies above a certain age and whatever.
Right.
If she'd been born in a new generation, well, perhaps, but maybe there is a privacy about her medical condition and her
Okay.
symptoms and whatever, particularly a disease like colon cancer. And, one can imagine the kind of symptoms of colon cancer that maybe you wouldn't want to discuss. Uh,
Yeah.
Perhaps that's why it wasn't diagnosed until the very end. And then
Yeah.
you think about moon in uh, her moon in conjunct the IC. There is, in spite of her public persona, and I think the moon very much helped that. In spite of all that, her moon represents something that is private, and it's that moon in Capricorn, or which
Okay.
is, I would have said, quite reserved. And looking at the aspects of the moon, I mean, the moon is in its detriment. The moon is not in its detriment. It's in its detriment
Cap-
in moon in
Capricorn.
Capricorn. It's not the best place for the moon to be in, and I'm not quite sure how that works. I mean,
Okay.
her chart in a way contradicts some ideas about astrology. But if you think about it, she has Cancer on the midheaven, and so if you want to know about this person's career and this work, you look at the ruler of the midheaven, and the ruler of the midheaven is Capricorn, is the moon in Capricorn. So
Okay.
in one sense, not a great moon, but at least it's an
Yeah.
angular moon, and her moon is kind of trine Jupiter. But that moon, she's got Jupiter in the 12th, and so uh, that's kind of interesting. There is
Yeah.
a weird coincidence with Elizabeth Montgomery, which I noticed quite recently.
Oh,
It relates to another chart,
okay.
and you want to hear about this coincidence?
Yes, I would love to.
So I don't know. I mean, I was watching. One does follow the news, and I don't know if you were were following this rift between J.K. Rowling and Emma Watson.
A bit,
Have
yes. I,
you?
I did hear about that.
So I mean, again, I don't want to express any views here or upset anyone, but So my understanding of it is that Emma Watson was quite a vociferous advocate of trans rights.
Hmm.
And of course, J.K. Rowling has been very supportive of the rights of women as she sees it. For example, women having their own spaces, biological women having their own spaces. And Emma Watson had taken the view that a trans woman is a real woman. Again, I'm not expressing any opinions
Right, right.
here. And then I was thinking about Emma Watson, and the thing about obviously the parallel between Elizabeth Montgomery and Emma Watson is that they both played witches.
That's
I
right.
mean,
Yeah.
and so there are other parallels. Elizabeth Montgomery was a major progressive. I mean, she was
Yes, I read
very,
about that.
very progressive. And the second, I can't remember his name, the first stage husband in Bewitched was Dick York, and then there was
Right. I
someone
read
else.
about this. Yeah.
God, I can't remember his name. And so he was gay, and I think she opened. There was some Los Angeles gay pride
And she was right
parade, or
there. Yes.
she opened it, and with her Bewitched co-star, she was very much into progressive causes.
Right.
And that can be an Aries thing because she was born on April the 15th. Now, the thing about Emma Watson is Emma Watson was also born on April the 15th. And
Oh, okay.
and Emma Watson also has the moon on the IC. And that is, to my mind, a very weird coincidence. The fact they're born on the same day, the fact they both played witches,
Hmm.
and the fact that they're both very progressive.
That's really interesting.
And so, in the case of, again, Emma Watson is not someone I know anything or much about, but she has
Yeah.
not moon in Capricorn on the IC, but she has moon in Sagittarius on the IC.
Okay.
And again, and so if you think about Emma Watson, Elizabeth Montgomery, Kim Kardashian, they certainly know how to
Yeah.
project themselves. They certainly
Yes.
are
Very
in the
well.
public. So
Yeah.
just because you have moon on the IC doesn't mean you're hiding.
Okay.
In fact, you may be
Probably the
familiar
opposite.
and in fact, it may be if you've got a planet on the IC, you are secure with it. So if you think
I
about
see.
Joe Rogan having Mercury on the IC
He's very
and
comfortable. Yeah.
being he's completely
Talking.
comfortable with talking. And likewise, the moon is the public. So Emma Watson, not J.K., because we don't know her birth time, I don't think. Emma Watson, Elizabeth Montgomery, Kim Kardashian, they are very, very comfortable with publicity. So that might be a way we can look at a planet on the IC, or like J.D. Vance
Right.
with Mars on the IC. Maybe he's very comfortable with being aggressive.
Wow. It's really interesting. I would have read that as somebody just learning. I would have probably looked into that the wrong way. But when you know people, like when you take famous people and kind of look at their charts, then that's when you would see, right, the contradiction. Because if it was somebody that I didn't, that wasn't famous, and I'm just looking at their chart, I would have probably taken that the wrong way, like they would go inward instead of projecting outward to the public, right?
Yes, I mean that would be the temptation.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's why it's good to
but
look at famous
that and
people's charts
yeah, I
to
know. I mean,
practice.
some people do get irritated by looking at
Yeah,
certain
I
famous
bet.
people. I mean,
Yeah.
I get this on.
Megan.
Yeah, Megan. I talk about Megan.
I find it helpful actually,
and
because we
I
all know her.
talk about. Yeah, we know her. I don't have to explain who she is.
Yeah, yeah.
Likewise with Princess Catherine, Prince William's wife. I mean,
Right,
she's got
right.
Jupiter on the IC,
Okay.
and that Jupiter on the IC could work in many different ways. I mean, maybe that makes her lucky. I mean, she's just had
Yeah.
cancer. I don't know what kind of I don't know what kind of cancer she had.
Right.
Jupiter is potentially a planet of growth, as in not necessarily always a good a good type of growth. I mean, a cancer is a
Right.
growth. So
Exactly.
so I
Yeah.
mean, but we don't really have the details there. But yeah, the thing about famous people is they don't have to be explained. Very often, famous people have times of birth.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if for example, everyone born in California for some reason, you'll always get a time of birth for someone born in California.
Right.
Other states, not so much, but well, it depends on the state. But
That's why so
I
many
think
people
it
have
really,
issues finding their birth time because it's not written down usually.
yeah. I mean, I think people who want to find their birth time are usually able to find it in the
Yeah.
modern era. But
Now times. Yeah.
it's
It's
but
definitely
yeah,
helpful. Yeah.
yeah, of course, it could be that when we're looking at famous people, we're looking at an extreme subset. Famous people are not normal.
No.
So maybe when you do the horoscope of your neighbor and they have moon on the IC, maybe they really do want to keep themselves to themselves.
Yeah. Very different. Um, and I know after Bewitched, Elizabeth Montgomery chose to take on more darker, psychologically complex roles. Um, there was a movie, Lizzie Borden. I don't know if you watched that. I watched some of it. A role depicting a real person who had brutally murdered her father and stepmother.
Oh,
And I think Elizabeth really tried to portray a more emotionally complex, wounded character rather than the evil archetype. And then there's the other movie called A Case of Rape. We get a really raw view of her in that movie. She was an excellent actress. And I know drama or acting can be another way of some people releasing certain issues they hold. Um, and something that expressive like acting or drama can help some individuals actually. I know near the end of her life, she had symptoms. She passed off. I read she thought it was a cold or the flu, but she continued along with pain and weight loss, which then led her to seek medical attention. And then unfortunately, that led to her diagnosis of cancer. Um, and I will say, someone like myself, I would probably have done the same thing. I don't usually run off to the doctor unless I've broken something, but I actually try to avoid the medical system. But I would have probably done the same thing. Just ignore the symptoms, pull up my socks, and keep going. But again, unfortunately for her, it was that diagnosis, right? And she kept everything very private. Like you said, I don't think she had a funeral. Would that type of delayed recognition of a or hidden health issue be seen in the eighth house or the IC?
well, I mean, looking at Elizabeth Montgomery's chart, it's not a chart I feel that particularly wants to be analyzed.
Yeah,
You know, one relates to different charts in different ways, but
right.
it's almost saying, "Stay away.
Stop there.
I
Yeah.
don't want to." It's that kind of chart. So it's not a chart that I find that I can look at for ages. It's not a chart
I
that
see.
it's not a
Yeah.
chart. It's not a chart I find I mean, I find it interesting up to a point. I find that moon on the
Yeah.
IC interesting. I mean, I think that there are things about that chart which, there is a sense with perhaps with Elizabeth Montgomery that she is perhaps, in one sense, she's acting, and she has a public
Right.
role, and perhaps the public role allows her to keep the private role hidden in a strange
I
way.
see. Yeah.
And she was born towards sunset. I mean, well, 4:38 p.m. So she's got the Sun and Venus in the seventh house, and so the Sun in Aries. There's something, it's kept
She, right. She
separate,
was already so
and
secret about her life, and we're looking at her chart.
and so in terms of what talks about that intensity? I mean,
Yeah.
okay, it might be. I mean, I'm sure a lot of it is connected with that moon in the IC. So that's certainly an aspect of it. But it's almost like, she she's playing with the shadows,
Yeah.
and there are things that she doesn't fully want to look at, and certainly doesn't necessarily want to discuss with other
Right.
people, and certainly sort of other people poring over her chart, what sort of 30 years after her death.
Yeah. Yeah. I see. And that's the level of respect that, real astrologers will take and say, okay, it's enough. And that's really interesting too. Um, One thing I've noticed, well, in the past few weeks, as I was looking at her chart and trying to figure things out for today, it took me back to looking at my own chart because I haven't looked at it in a while. And my IC, which I didn't really focus on too much, to be honest, just because I kept having gaps in my lessons. But my IC is in Scorpio, and close by is Saturn retrograde in Scorpio in the third house, and then Pluto retrograde at 29 Libra in the third house. So I was kind of looking into all this, and it absolutely describes my inner world, the parts of myself that I keep quiet. Um, and I know this transit's happening right now. All in. So I definitely think looking into your IC is useful, especially for transformative periods of life. If you're trying to understand yourself more. Archie, is there anything else you would like to add before we conclude the episode?
Well, the IC is. I think the IC is an important point in the chart. I think people tend to focus on the ascendant, on the mid
Yeah.
heaven, perhaps because they're sort of easier to deal with, but they're more straightforward. They're more out in the open. But the IC is something that's sometimes neglected. But I think it's
Mhm.
something that's always worth looking at. And even if you haven't got a planet on the IC, you've got a sign on the IC, and the IC, it does have a ruler.
Yeah. Yeah, well, after reviewing Elizabeth Montgomery's chart, we see the power of strength, of private strength, dignity, resilience, and how it can shape our lives from the inside out. And we can see that every chart carries its own silent story, the soul's architecture, the foundation that allows true rebirth to happen. Archie, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you in this space with me on the first episode. Your insight and wisdom has brought a lot of depth to the discussion. It's very meaningful to have you on here as the first guest, and I'm grateful to share this knowledge with others that are very interested and curious about themselves and transformation and going through dark periods of their life. Archie has his own YouTube channel, Talking Astrology with Archie. So I will have links at some point today in this video that you can click, but you can definitely go and check it out and subscribe. And also subscribe to this channel. It's very new. But to everyone listening, thank you very much for joining. And we will try and do this every fortnight. The podcast will usually be audio, so it will be on Spotify. But hopefully you'll join me for the next episode of 8th House Portal. Thank you for stepping into the portal.